This is Matt Hurt at Obsessive Viewer on Twitter, and this is a special episode of ObsessiveViewer.com's The Obsessive Viewer Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show, each episode. You can find back episodes at ovpodcast.com, find the blog at obsessiveviewer.com, and subscribe to the subreddit at r/obsessiveviewer. Also, a quick note before I get started, Shocktober in Irvington 2 is an event here in Indianapolis that we'll be hosting on October 16th. We're going to be screening short horror films from local filmmakers and giving away raffles, prizes, and interviewing the filmmakers at the Irving Theater in Irvington. All money we make is going to go directly to the Irvington Historical Society. You can find more information about that at shocktoberinirvington.com. This episode is a special episode, as I mentioned before. It's just me and a guest that I interviewed. Tiny's not here for this one, but he'll be here later this week for our discussion of the movie Straight Outta Compton. But this episode is special because it is an interview that I conducted with the writer and director of Ask Me Anything. Ask Me Anything is a movie that I watched recently that you can hear me talk about in the potpourri section of OV124, the comedy sequels episode. Ask Me Anything was just a really, really mind-blowing experience watching it on Netflix. It was a great indie drama, and I was delighted to have the opportunity to interview Mr. Burnett via Skype. So before I get to the interview, I just want to mention that you can follow Allison at Allison_Burnett on Twitter. That's 2 L's and 2 T's. You can also contact him at AllisonBurnett.com. And you can also email the main character of Ask Me Anything at KatieCampenfelt.com. Ask Me Anything was a movie that he adapted himself from his novel, Undiscovered Gyrl, which you can find on Amazon and anywhere really that you find books. And also, Mr. Burnett just recently published the sequel to Undiscovered Gyrl called Another Girl. And finally, like about 2 days after we recorded this interview, news broke that a script penned by Allison is going to be made into a movie. The movie is a romantic drama called Oxford. The film follows an American Rhodes Scholar who, after arriving at Oxford University, falls for an arrogant teaching assistant who is quietly fighting terminal cancer. When she finds out the reason he is so standoffish, they make the most of each day, traveling the world together. I'm super excited for this, and after getting the chance to talk to Allison Burnett and reading his book and seeing his movie, I just have I'm so looking forward to just seeing his career and following his career from here on out. So without further ado, here is the interview with Allison Burnett. Thanks for listening, and hope you enjoy. First of all, thanks again for coming on. This is I'm really excited to talk to you because it's rare that I get to talk to the people that are responsible for the things that I'm really impressed by and fond of, I guess. So it's a real treat. And for the listeners, why don't you kind of tell us about yourself, how you got started in the business and all that?
Well, first, let me tell you that I think you'd be surprised how often the creators of movies that you might like, especially if they're independent films, how accessible they will be. Because one of the great challenges in the marketplace these days is that there's just such a glut of choices, and we're all just being besieged by choices. There's whole TV shows we've never even seen that our best friend loves, and we don't even get to it because we're bombarded. So if you approach a filmmaker or a TV creator through Twitter or Facebook, some off through social media, and you get to them, I think you'll be surprised how many people will say yes. They're just people like you, and they're just sitting around. They want people to see what they've done, and they know that the world is drowning in choices, and that people are much more accessible, I think, these days. Okay, well, how I got started was I spent my 20s in New York City toiling in hideous shit-eating anonymity. I sort of started off for about 3 months as an actor after college, where I went to Northwestern. I quit acting. I devoted myself to playwriting. I went to a 1-year program in playwriting at the Juilliard School. And playwriting at that point in the 80s was largely devoted to sort of broad, shticky sitcoms put on the stage. Like the theater that I loved of O'Neill and Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller, like that tradition was really dying fast, and I felt really sort of separate from what was being done around me. So I began writing fiction and novels, and I wrote hundreds of pages of fiction that never saw the light of day. I didn't have an agent. I proofread at a legal law firm at night, and I tutored high school kids on the SAT test during the day. And I just worked my tail off for about 10 years, half the time making money, half the time writing. I didn't really realize how much I was actually teaching myself about writing during that period of hell. But, I couldn't, I would go to a party and just want to hide my head in shame. I saw a lot of my friends at Northwestern were doing great things in the arts, and I just felt like I was going to be trapped at that law firm till the end of time. And then toward the end of my 20s, I met this guy who had been a bank robber, and he had been in jail for 8 years, and he really was looking for someone that would help him get his stories on paper. And I wouldn't say he was necessarily a writer, because he didn't come from that place, and he didn't have a lot of literary training or experience, but he really could tell a story instinctively, and he was a very good raconteur and a great ear for dialogue. And I knew the minute I met him that if I wrote with him, that somehow it was going to give me a career. I knew that writing for me in my 20s was like, as it is for many young writers, was sort of self-therapeutic. And I was very close to what I was writing and very close to my heroes. And because I'm a writer, I am by definition not a very active person in the grand arena of the world. I mean, there are exceptions, but I'd say as a rule, writers are often observers. And so my autobiographical heroes tended to get passive because writers are passive. And so he was anything but that. And I knew that writing with him would deliver me from my hell. So I wrote 2 screenplays with him. He came to Los Angeles. He slept on the floor of Jason Bateman, whom he had met at a club. Jason was probably a good, 8 years younger than we both were. Wow. And he went to parties, and he found us a manager, and he found us an agent, or I think maybe eventually an agent. But we had a manager, and the next thing I know, I get this call that we've sold one of our scripts to Roger Corman.
Huh. Wow.
The king of B movies. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was, wow, good for Roger Corman. He finally wants to make a really good, serious movie. I was a little bit naive. I didn't realize that it was going to go the other way. So it was a very serious movie about my writing partner's experiences in jail. And it was about race relations in prison. But it was a serious movie. And so I just said, what the hell? It's time to leap into the void. It's that old sort of Buddhist idea, you jump off the cliff and suddenly and when you're certain you're going to die, you suddenly sprout wings and you fly. Mm-hmm. And I sort of had read that enough in enough New Age books that I sort of sensed that what I was doing was the thing you have to do. So I just sold all my shit and I came to LA. And I was 31. At that point, I'd made $100 as a writer. I really had nothing. But what I knew that LA would give me is hope. And I knew that I had a ton more writing experience than a lot of my young competitors, mm-hmm. because I had spent a whole decade writing my ass off. So I came out here and they turned our beautiful, serious movie into a sea-level kickboxing movie called Forced to Fight, Blood Fist 3, Forced to Fight. So it was a really, a debasing introduction to Hollywood, but it got me. And within about a year, we were in the Writers Guild. And about 4 years later, after writing with my partner during the day, at night, I would work on my own stuff because the stuff I wanted to do was separate from what I wanted to do with him. And I wrote a script, and it sold. It was like a big spec sale. And that was exactly, 21 years ago.
Wow.
And from that moment on, I knew it at the time. Like, I never had to do anything again that I didn't want to do. I never had to do a job. And so that's when my life really changed. And that was probably my 12th script. Wow. I mean, we wrote a lot of scripts, he and I did, and I wrote some on my own. I wrote with him. We worked around the clock. I mean, so even though it looked like a Cinderella story, it was gruelingly hard work.
Right.
And I would say the next sort of milestone was when I got my first studio movie made, which was Autumn in New York. And about 4 days before they shot the movie, Richard Gere had them bring in a rewriter right before shooting, and the guy just sort of crapped on the script in a whole bunch of places. And so if you watch the movie, you'll sort of see that it's stylistically right, and then it just kind of goes south, and then it comes back, and then it's just sort of it goes back and forth. And I realized that if I could write a script that would get me all those meetings and all the work it brought me and all the acclaim in the town, and it could be turned into a movie that critics were ridiculing, that I was never really going to be safe and have any sense of authorial control. And that's when I began to look back at all the hundreds of pages I had written in my 20s in New York, and I reimagined them with a new narrator, with a new point of view, and I narrated them not self-therapeutically, but from the point of view of a fat, tall, drunk, bald, middle-aged, bipolar, gay alcoholic. Maybe I said drunk and alcoholic. And he's hilarious, and he's read everything in all the Western literature, and I could just give full voice to any kind of comedy or point of view or reading or erudition. Anyway, so I wrote this character and he began telling those stories that I was writing in my 20s, and that led to the publication of 3 novels: Christopher, The House Beautiful, and Death by Sunshine. And they're all narrated by this sort of bigger than life, kind of Ignatius Riley, kind of hilarious madman. And then in 2000, and so I just went on my merry way doing a lot of screenwriting jobs, falling in with a company called Lakeshore Entertainment. That I've done 6 movies at Lakeshore. I've had a great time and a great career there, and they let me do everything from like a fame for teenagers to Feast of Love, which is like an R-rated adult movie, to Untraceable, which is basically high-end torture porn. And Underworld. They just let me write all different kinds of things, and I've used the money from those jobs and stuff. It enabled me to direct 2 features, Red Meat and Ask Me Anything. One of the turning points is when the strike finally came in 2008.
Right.
We would picket all morning and eat chocolate. I called it chocolate walking because they would donate all this candy. And since you're walking in circles under the midday sun, I thought, well, I'm burning a lot of calories, so I can just sit and eat all this crap.
Right.
But I kind of enjoyed it because, and they told us to set down our pens and not to write any screenplays. So I took the opportunity, freed from the teat of Hollywood money and temptation, to write a novel. So I'd wake up at 6 in the morning, as I always do. I'd write till 10 in the morning, and then I would walk in circles and be a proud union member. But meanwhile, I was writing Undiscovered Gyrl, which became Ask Me Anything. So I sort of owe the strike. I don't know when I would have gotten around to writing that book, but I did. And since then, I've tried to balance, movie writing, directing, and writing novels. And I just finished the sequel to Undiscovered Gyrl. And so to me, it's a balancing act between the money you need to survive and the joy. I mean, the money you need to survive and the joy and sort of pride and feeling of authorship that I get from being a screenwriter. Hold on a second. From being a novelist. I'm going to unplug my phone so that doesn't happen again.
Okay, you're fine.
No, so to me, it's a balancing act between sort of, the art of being a novelist and a director, and the fun, and monetary necessity of being a screenwriter. I mean, if I could only do one forever, or I don't know what I'd do if I could do one, but I would certainly rather, direct movies and write novels where I have control than write screenplays where I'm always, no matter what, tailoring what I want to say to the division of the producers and the director.
Right. That's awesome. And first of all, congratulations on all like your success in doing that, because that's just, it sounds so daunting and so like it's impressive that you can cultivate a career from that kind of experience of just kind of just jumping into it that way. That's really impressive.
Well, it's less daunting when you're a maniac. When you really feel a compulsion to write, and when you wake up every morning and it's not a drudgery and it's not a chore or this thing that you dread, but it really comes out of some sort of profound, coiled, inner, neurotic place that needs to make something out of the chaos of life. It becomes it becomes a way of life. And it's like people who work out 5 or 6 days a week. Like you and I might dread going to the gym, but to them, it's the oxygen they breathe. Yeah. And that's what I think writers need to do is they need to get as addicted sort of to writing as jocks are to working out. Because, nothing's as addictive as writing, and also nothing's as addictive as not writing. So once you start to not write, you get addicted to not writing, and then you start to dread it. So what I've done, my solution has just been, and actually in a really weird way, the computer and email has supported me in this. Because as long as my ass is in the chair at dawn, and I stay there till lunchtime, it doesn't really matter, ironically, whether I'm writing or I'm literally like doing promotion for the book or writing emails or doing, my taxes, whatever the hell it is. I'm there, I'm focused, I'm in my office, and I'm not getting up from the desk. And that's the way of life. And so then, I finish something, and a day or two later, I'm ready. I feel, well, now what? And I just move a new project in, and I keep going. And that's how it's been. And all it really required of me was to be very steadfast in keeping it balanced and not just succumbing to the one thing, and not being so foolhardy that I write novels and go broke and my family ends up bankrupt because I don't make any money writing books, or just writing screenplays where you make money and you don't know what that, and your soul just dies on the vine. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your screenwriting career and your experience with screenwriting, because from what I understand, you had a lot of kind of assignment projects from studios, like I assume Underworld was an assignment. How do you feel with, or how do you feel about doing those assignment projects like that? Do you have I'm sure that as a creative person that you have more interest in doing a complete, like a spec script or your own project. But how do you feel about the kind of system of doing assignment projects?
Almost every writer loves assignments because it's, you're getting paid, and ideally I would never take an assignment that I didn't think I could do a good job with. I mean, when I've never passed on an offer of work. I've never said no, thank you. Keep your. But I don't get into the situation where anybody would offer me something unless I like it. I don't even pursue. So I've read things all the time where I go, oh, this will never be a good movie, or this is just so awful. Or they want you to adapt a book, but you'd have to throw out 95% of the book. So I go, what's the point? I'd rather write an original. I never pursue anything I don't think I could do a good job with. At the same time, what I discovered, especially after the strike and the recession in 2008, was that you just have to keep writing spec scripts. And what I did was I chased assignments like every other writer did, and then I realized to my horror that they had disappeared, and that most of the jobs out there weren't even jobs. They looked like jobs, and then they would just disappear. They never make the movie, or else there were so many writers up for it, they were just wasting your time. That Hollywood really changed in a seismic way after 2008. Screenwriters' quotes were like cut in half. The industry has doubled its profits since the strike, and yet all writers across the board are making far less money. They're doing TV shows where they have an order of 10 shows, but the time it takes you to write them is as long as it used to take you to write 22, so you're making half the money for the same time. I mean, lots of things are changing in a very dramatic way, and so my way to combat that was I just started writing spec after spec after spec, and I just always seemed to. I sort of discovered I don't know if it's a formula or a recipe for selling them, which is writing really big parts for actors and actresses, and staying within certain commercial guidelines. And of those specs, a few have gotten made and a lot don't. But when you sell them, not only does it make you some money, but then it leads you to getting. Usually, then you get a couple of assignments because you're kind of hot for a little while, and your new script makes you relevant again.
Nice.
But a lot of writers that just stopped writing spec and just did assignment. When that strike hit and the recession hit, their careers were just over. They just started teaching or retired because those assignments. There used to be 30 of them for every movie that got made, and it's just not that way anymore.
Jeez. Wow, that's a shame. It's a shame to see such a drastic change in the business and the business model of just Hollywood, and even from an outsider. I mean, it's just kind of crazy to see such a drastic change there.
Right now, really, what it's about is talent finding capital. It's about the money looking for scripts and the scripts looking for money. The studios don't really make movies anymore except tentpole movies, and they make some Oscar contenders for A-list directors, but they really aren't in the business of making movies the way they were. The number of output has drastically fallen. So really what you're looking for are the mini studios and independent financing. And then once the movie's complete, then you go out and get distribution.
Okay. How do you feel about the independent film scene, the kind of model of independent filmmaking?
It's terrible. I mean, it's really bad. It is. I mean, the advent of the digital camera and the ability to shoot cheaply has made it easier to make movies, but for the most part, it just means there's more bad movies out there. People are practically shooting them on their fucking cell phones, and they look terrible. But the sad reality, the reason I think it's really brutal right now, is it's so hard to make your money back. Because the real indie cinema in America today is Netflix. Yeah. And Netflix pays just pennies compared. So let's say you have an indie movie that 1 million people see. In the old days, if those 1 million people saw it in a movie theater, well, that was a hit movie, right? That would be like $8 million, right? Oh, yeah. Let's say it was $8 a ticket or $10 a ticket. That would have been $10 million. It would be a hit movie. And even if some of that was on DVD, it would still, there was a real return there. But now Netflix can pay an independent film $40,000, and 1 million people of their subscribers will see it in the first month. So they're just paying 2.5 cents or whatever that is. My math isn't so great, but they're paying virtually nothing for those subscribers to see it. And the filmmakers might be thrilled. I mean, just thrilled with the access to those people. But at the same time, you want to pay your investors back. Right. So, and there's still some DVD out there if there's a commercial movie. There's still some pay-per-view, but it just doesn't add up. If you're going to make an indie film, you really should try to make it for, $250,000. I mean, if you want to make your money back, it's really, really hard. So that's the dilemma. Everyone's facing this in music, everywhere. It's like there's all these choices, but nobody's getting paid. Like, how can you do it so that you can make another one? It's hard. Right.
Yeah, that sounds horrible, but it brings out. I'm sure it brings out an amount of creativity that you kind of pour. Like, I can see how it could be kind of demoralizing, I guess, to kind of pour your heart into something that you're really passionate about, and then to kind of see it go that way. But I'm thrilled. Listen, I'm thrilled at how many people have seen Ask Me Anything. It feels nice to be culturally relevant, and I feel that among a certain age group, the movie is really being seen rather widely. So I'm thrilled about that. I just would like to pay my investors back, and I feel like it's going to be a long road because the vast majority of people that will ever see it are seeing it on Netflix, where there just isn't a lot of money to be made. I mean, Showtime
Showtime. A lot of people saw it on Showtime also, but again, they don't pay a lot for an indie movie.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, that's a shame because it really is an incredible movie, and it's great that it's at least getting into people's homes to be able to see it, and that's great.
I think the timing of Britt Robertson was a big plus because our movie got delayed in being released for various boring logistical reasons. It was done a bit before it came out, but it ended up working out rather nicely. Even though we opened it in December, which is a bad month because nothing's happening, but it worked out well because it was right as Tomorrowland and The Longest Ride were about to open. So Britt was being known by a lot more people. I mean, we had 10,000 people a day watching Ask Me Anything on Netflix in the beginning. I'm sorry, 10,000 people reviewing it a day.
Wow.
They don't give you the exact numbers, but I've heard it's between 3 and 5 times as many people are watching it as review it. Okay. So you're talking about 30 to 50,000 people a day leading up to the release of Tomorrowland. Ooh. So that was really a big boon for the film.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's great, and like I said, it gets the name out there, your name out there, and I'm sure that'll hopefully get you more projects and stuff like that. I wanted to ask you, this is your second film you've directed, the first being Red Meat, and that was in '97.
Yeah.
What were the differences between the experiences and between filming the two movies? And
they were kind of remarkably similar. I mean, when I finally directed a movie, I had been on a movie set. Gregory Hines had directed a movie I wrote, and he was a first-time director. And just watching how sort of passive and trying to be discreet and honoring a very talented man now deceased, but he really, really couldn't have been more lackadaisical about the whole process.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, and the movie was actually coherent. But I learned a lot watching him sort of not do it. I said, my God, because I came from theater. I had directed plays. I knew a lot about acting. I knew a lot about how to work with actors. And so I saw this and I thought, God, I can do this. This is not daunting. So when I finally had my first big spec sale, I had enough, fuck you money that I could actually direct Red Meat because a couple of other people wanted to direct it. And I said, I don't need to give this one away. I have enough money to say no. And I said, no, only I can direct it. And they let me direct it. I made it for $500,000. We shot it in 18 days. And I really had the time of my life. And I felt that we had a very sane set. There wasn't a lot of craziness because, the fish rots from the head down. I was a grown-up at this point. I wasn't like an egomaniacal, insecure kid who was like screaming at people and saying, that faucet has to have running water. I would say, hey, what? He's washing his hands. You don't need running water because I'll just put in a sound effect. And the crew was staring. They couldn't believe that there was something I was letting go to make their lives better. I was always trying to make it work for people, and they seemed very grateful about it. And the actors were happy, and I was happy, and it was a great cast. And I just had an absolutely great time. If you had told me that I would not direct another movie for so many years after that, I would have just said impossible. Like I found what I love to do. But then when I ran up against obstacles and I realized, and Red Meat had a lot of trouble. It couldn't get into theaters because we didn't have a male lead because John Slattery was not famous then. And John Slattery from Mad Men is the lead, and he's hilarious, and he runs around with his butt hanging out, and it's the funniest damn performance and scary performance. But and this guy James Frain is in it, who's a lovely actor who is now works constantly. But again, no one knew these people. The only stars we had were Lara Flynn Boyle and Jennifer Grey. So really, it was very hard to get into theater. We were in one theater, or maybe two. So we ended up being the first world premiere on the Sundance Channel. When they first launched their channel, they needed a movie to help launch it. So they did the world premiere on the channel. And so the movie made its money back, but it never really had its day. And it was such a dark movie at a very politically correct time. It was a movie about misogyny. And, there are a lot of highly unintelligent people who see a movie about misogynists and think the movie is misogynistic, which is ridiculous because the movie, if anything, is skewering and examining and turning misogyny inside out. But so it was a very dark movie at a time when people were very politically correct, which is what's starting to happen again. It's coming full circle. But anyway, so the movie didn't really lead to much for me. So I just went, and then when I wanted to feel like an author again, which I felt as a director, I just went and began writing novels, because I wrote all my novels after that. Okay. And so that sort of fulfilled me. And then it was only recently when I realized that if I didn't make Ask Me Anything, no one else was going to, that I said, what the hell? And a young producer went out and found $300,000 to get us started. And I had just finished the script, so I thought, well, this is perfect timing. Let's just jump in and do this. And thank God I did, because I'm very proud of it. And it was another one. It was another just a great experience.
With Ask Me Anything, there was. I don't want to get into spoilers, obviously, because part of the experience of seeing it is not to be spoiled. Even though I feel like that movie, the way that the movie plays out makes it really hard to spoil without. In terms of build up, it's such an emotional like roller coaster that like even having the idea in my head of there being something significant to the end of the story, like I wasn't prepared for what exactly it was, and it was really impressive. And
but one of the things about doing a movie like that is this marketplace where marketing is always aimed toward the path of least resistance. So because it's a movie about a beautiful young girl, they go, okay, let's get the kids, especially the females. Let's get teenagers. So the marketing, which you pointed out, I thought really eloquently in your review, the marketing is completely geared, toward creating an illusion that it's a sex comedy. And maybe a slightly edgy one, maybe, but you still kind of think it's like a slightly edgier, but it has an Amanda Bynes look, that poster. It drives me crazy. And so what happens is, it's hard to sell a movie that has a surprise ending. And like, what movie do people think they're watching until they find out what they are watching? And they're afraid that if they bill it as a drama, then it will turn off young people who just want to have fun on a Saturday night, So it gets really complicated. Marketing is a bitch in this world. So they figure, okay, let's just go get all the young girls. Some of their boyfriends and friends will watch it and hope that those people like it so much that it slowly widens out to adults. But I got to tell you, man, it's very hard to get adults to watch the movie. It really is. They just can't imagine it's for them when they see the poster.
Yeah, it's one of those.
And it's them.
Yeah. I
have friends in their 50s and 60s who really like it, but they would never have watched that movie. And by the way, they wouldn't have picked up the book either, because the book has a completely YA cover, like it's just sort of chick lit, and it's going to be about designer brand names and hair and boys, and that's what it looks like. And or maybe it looks a little more soulful than that, but not much. So as I like to say, if Catcher in the Rye were written today, it would be a YA novel. And to me, that's really a chilling reality, but it's absolutely the truth.
Yeah, I agree completely. In transitioning from or adapting your novel to a screenplay, you obviously had to make some cuts and everything. Did you feel like you had to part with anything in particular that was important in terms of saving time or anything like that, or was it kind of an experience where you knew the beats and you knew the characters enough to where you could do it
I had waited 3 years before I adapted it, so I had the necessary distance from the material. It would have been very painful to do it at a sooner time, but at this point it was easier. In my final shooting script, it was 103 pages or 105 pages, there was more stuff from the book. Once we shot it and I started distilling it, I could do without less and less and less, and I just kept trying to distill it down to the essence of the story. But there was one more guy in the script that I did shoot, and it's actually a guy that went on to have a good career, Jussie Smollett from Empire.
Oh, okay.
He's sort of becoming a star now, and he played a one-night stand that she has at a bar, and he starts to call and get kind of creepy, and there was just one too much It was like just one, in a book that's a few hundred pages, there's a lot of sex, but it didn't feel that extreme. But in a 90-minute movie, it felt like she was getting laid an awful lot, and it started to get kind of dismal and depressing that her self-esteem was so low. So that had to go. And there were a few other little tiny kind of sub things that went. But I felt, I started to leave the book way behind and just see it as a living, breathing new entity that had to make sense for a new audience, and it wasn't painful really at all. But I did read when I wrote Another Girl, I did reread Undiscovered Gyrl, and it was fun to revisit it and to remind myself of all, like when she works for Obama and all her political radicalism. She's all inspired, and she won't vote for Hillary because Hillary looks like her has Tharm and Ankle. And then when you think she's gotten all politically ideal, this is a line that freaked people out. She starts to have sex with one of the characters, and she basically says that as long as she can have sex with him, she doesn't care if Hitler's president.
I think I highlighted that line in my Kindle.
I love it. These people freak out on a 17-year-old girl who's just being funny and crazy. It's just so funny to me. And of course they act like I said that. Like I don't care if Hitler's president. It's just so funny. But no, Katie definitely has a bigger, wilder, kind of more manic, abundant, humorous personality in the book. There's just no way a movie can just give vent to that much language and whimsy and humor. There's so much going on in her than a book. In a book, she can just prattle at us for 300 pages, and you just can't do that in a movie. Yeah,
absolutely. And one thing that really drew me to both the movie and the book was am I pronouncing this word correctly? The epistolary epistolary. There we go. I've really only ever read that word, but the epistolary format.
It's a common theme among autodidacts is that they every now and then they run into a word they've read 40 times and they've never said it out loud. Like when my brother in high school said something was the epitome of something. It's a bit of me.
Yeah. About a few months ago, I ran into a situation where I realized that I was told very politely that I pronounce the word aesthetic with a hard AE, so it's like I've been pronouncing aesthetic as aesthetic for years.
That's funny.
Yeah, but with that format of storytelling, I just something like I could connect with that kind of blogger kind of storytelling device, because I mean, like when I was a teenager, I had like my own little personal blog, and it was a fun creative outlet, and I could see in the way that the character wrote, I could see how there was kind of layers to her personality that were shown through subtext, and especially in the book, and then I felt like Britt Robertson really embodied that role incredibly well, in terms of just showing her naivete and. But like kind of almost self-awareness in the way that she, like, you can tell, I don't know if this was intentional when you wrote it, but in the book, like, she'll have these passages where she'll say something and then it's like she'll give away, like she'll comment on the behavior of one of the men in her life, and it would be like almost with the intention or it would be almost with the awareness of what kind of person they are and how they view her, but she would say it with such a naive kind of like blinder of love, like a love obsessed sick person.
I think she goes in and out of moments of really sharp clarity about the motives of men, and then a kind of self-will, sort of blind rose-colored glasses view of them because she's in love. And I think teenage girls do this a lot. Like you sort of, when you're in they'll get in a fight and they'll say it right on the nose. They see it, they know it, and then 4 days later they miss the guy, and then 8 days later they're over at his bed again.
Yeah,
and and young men do the same thing. She's playing you, or she's not sincere, or she's never going to be there for you, and yet you keep convincing yourself that somehow she will. Britt, I have only the most amazing things to say about her as an actress. She was just such a pleasure to work with. I mean, talk about a professional. She's like grimly serious about her work. She does not mess around. Like, she really takes it seriously and works really, really hard. And I almost felt like we had a telepathic connection at times. I always knew exactly what she was doing. I could see every wheel turning. Exactly. She has a great ability to show what she's thinking, what her characters are thinking. You can read her in a really great way. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I have nothing but respect for her.
Yeah, the way that she just kind of, like I said, embodied the role. It was very, like, she kind of, I mentioned in my review that she kind of has this kind of faux innocence that she kind of puts on this front when she talks to especially her parents, that, like, I felt like that was just a certain nuance to her performance that was just really really remarkable, and I just really appreciated that. And seeing that and then going and reading the character on the page was just, it was a really nice kind of cohesive experience, because you can kind of tell that she really tapped into the character and the story.
Watching those scenes with Martin Sheen was amazing, because here's Martin, a guy in his 70s who's been in so many movies with this supreme technique, and here's a girl that's been the lead on TV shows who really understands the camera already. And they were like two veterans together. There was like an immediate respect. Like, he basically did a scene with her and looked at me, and his look said, "Holy Christ, you found the real deal here," you know. and I knew he was right. Hold on one second. I'm going to tell them to turn off the leaf blower.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Okay, we're nice and quiet again.
Okay.
That gave your viewers time to do a Google image search of Britt Robertson's love scenes.
Right.
In my movie. Oh my God, there's all crazy sites on Twitter and stuff. Mm-hmm. I see it on my feed all the time, like, you know, first time nude, Britt Robertson.
Yeah.
It's like, she's barely, I mean, she's like, you know, barely shows, I mean, really, it's not bad at all.
It's very tastefully done, and it's very, it's obviously very, very important to the story, and it's not like...
What you don't want is an inhibited actress who's uptight, self-conscious, and reaching for sheets and all that crap. And all I kept saying to the actresses, I'm not having people, you know, reaching for sheets and having things up to their neck. You know, it's so embarrassing when that happens. How about, like, in Girls, which is a show that I absolutely love, but every time she has sex in broad daylight, not Lena Dunham, but the other, the you know, what's her face, and she has sex in broad daylight, in her bedroom, like from behind, and she's always wearing a shirt. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I just don't understand. Like, why don't they just turn the lights off? But I didn't want any of it. I didn't want anything where for a moment you're aware of it. So that's why, and I didn't want anything that was supposed to be just about sexuality. I wanted it always to be something emotional or something funny or something painful that's happening in the scene, and she just happens to be partially clad. Mm-hmm. And I'm also making the viewer into a voyeur. Constantly.
Yeah.
And again, some viewers misinterpret that, and they actually think that, like, I'm the voyeur. Like, they don't get it that they're the voyeur. I'm the filmmaker. Like, I'm not sitting there looking in Britt's window. You're looking in Britt's window.
Right.
You know, it's such a simple, but it's such a difference, you know? And I saw some proud young feminist wrote something about the male eye is all over that movie. You're like, well, of course it is. And that's why when we finally do glimpse her a little bit naked, it's at the very end of the film when she's getting in the bath and it's all over now and she's in like this purifying bath and you think like smooth sailing ahead, and it was important to have right to the end. Like it's very self-conscious, for instance, that during one of her more painful moments, she's lying in bed, like weeping her guts out. She's covered in sweat, miserable because some terrible thing has happened in her life. And she's literally wearing like underwear with little cherries on it. I'm intentionally, in a sense, Lolita-ize her right at a moment when she's in her deepest emotional trial, because the audience is being put into the same role as the people feasting on her blog, and the reaction that young, beautiful women get everywhere they go, which is that they're, in our world that we live in, maybe the planet we live on, young, beautiful women have a tremendous amount of power, but they also have that same power can create really ugly, objectifying, predatory behavior from men.
Yeah.
And so that's always at play.
Oh, yeah. That's, wow. That is... I totally get that kind of insight into it, and the viewer is kind of a voyeur in the sense of, you know, obviously being part of
Our first shot of her, the first shot of her, we're outside her window, and we're looking in her window. I mean, the first shot of her blogging, I should say.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, wait, is it? No. Actually, I edited for so long. It's our very. Isn't it our very? It's our very first glimpse of her. Is her saying, "Wait a minute, what?" I feel so. I'm so tired right now. My kids get me up at 4 a.m. Anyway, it's one of our very first glimpses of her. We're seeing her through the window when she's blogging, and we're caught when she's alone at night and she's all alone in that dark room. We're outside the window. We're rarely inside the window.
Yeah, you definitely revisited that kind of shot, that is, or at least that kind of establishing shot of her blogging in that frame, and that definitely feels very deliberate.
How about in bed on Christmas night?
Mm-hmm.
When she's in bed on Christmas night, we see her from like 2 different windows, and at the end, she finally closes the curtain in our faces. Finally, at the very end, she slams it shut in our faces, and then what do we see? Then we're in her closet, and she's taking off her clothes. I mean,
yeah,
none of it's by accident. I can tell you that much.
Right, and that definitely is communicated very well. And I also wanted to ask you, and I don't want to keep you too long, but in terms of the men in the movie and in the story, there's a wide variety of different types of men. Like there's the relationship with her father, and then also kind of I mentioned this in the review, and I'm not sure. Like this was my interpretation of it, but her mother's boyfriend, played by Andy Buckley, he is. I get the sense that he is like he's just he could be a very positive force in her life, but she's so young and combative against him, just for the sole reason that he's invading her home life from her perspective. So she's very kind of very.
It's ironic that she actually has a loving man in her life. That she only has one moment with him where she's not fighting him,
mm-hmm.
and that's when he intervenes and helps her with her boyfriend, and she says thank you.
Yeah.
That's the only moment, and it's sort of that way in the book. I mean, she really is hard. She's tough on him,
mm-hmm.
which is ironic. I mean, think about the people that are really, really good for her. Well, there's her shrink, there's her stepdad, and there's Joel Seidler.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't let those 3 people have that much of an effect on her. She does by the end,
mm-hmm.
but it takes a lot. And in a way, and Glenn Warburg, Glenn in a way, her book burner. But, in every case, she's kind of not really letting that person have the full impact that they could.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that the way that you shot that scene where I won't give away what happens, but the scene where he intervenes, where her stepfather intervenes, like the way that was shot, I just loved the way that the kind of action is focused on her and Rory, and then the camera kind of swoops around as he comes in, and it's just I really appreciate that from a technical standpoint.
It was all one shot. It was all one shot. When you make an indie movie, if you're lucky, you have 4 takes. You usually have 2, sometimes 3. I mean, you really have to get it. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing it in one shot, the good news is it's 2/3 of a page that you got done. But what happens if it isn't just the way you want it? You're in big trouble. And that was the first take. And Rory's head went right through the wall. He leaves a big dent in the plasterboard.
Mm-hmm.
The sheetrock has a huge dent in it. And we were all kind of in shock. And we thought it was great. And I was ready to go print, moving
mm-hmm.
on. But everybody said, well, you can't do that. So we went ahead and shot a few more, and none of them equaled that first one, that sort of shocking. And we had rehearsed it a bit,
mm-hmm.
but a lot of that, because it's so physical and violent, you're sort of leaving it up to what happens at the moment. And it just was a little piece of, movie magic. It just worked out really well. And if you look carefully, in the deep background, you see her mother writing a religious painting. It's crooked. And she's putting it right, like way in the background. It all worked really seamlessly.
Nice. So, yeah, I went back and while I was watching it, I actually paused and rewound it because I just loved the way that just flowed so naturally through that one shot, and I really like that.
I'll give you something for film geeks that you'll appreciate. When she kicks him off her,
mm-hmm.
there is an edit in there. It's like a jump cut.
Okay.
Because what happened was there was this weird little hesitation before she kicked him, and it was just a little, and the editor we just snipped it out, and your eye barely catches it, but it makes it feel more violent. But you'll see it if you ever watch it again. You'll see this weird little cut right at the moment she kicks him off.
Nice. Yeah. I'll definitely be watching it again, and I'll definitely be suggesting it to people, because this is the kind of movie that it inspires a lot of conversation. And it was like I mentioned when I tweeted about it after I watched it, there was a moment where, as the credits started rolling, I was just sitting in my apartment, like right here where I am now, and I was just had this dumbfounded look on my face, and I kind of this was around like 11. It was right around the time I was about to go to bed for the night, and I had to work in the morning, and I was just like I needed time to process what had happened and what exactly I had seen, and it was just such a rare experience for me to have, because it's usually just, it's so rare to get that kind of emotional resonance from me.
What's so frustrating is I've always felt that there was a big male audience for this movie, and I notice on Twitter when guys do tweet about it, 90% of them really love it. And they don't get all like as freaked out by the ambiguities as a lot of the female viewers do, who get more invested in her and they want it all tied up. They want to know everything. The boys seem less, I don't know, I just noticed this. Like, the boys seem less upset that they don't know everything. So maybe your podcast and your review will help to give guys permission to see it. Because the poster, it really only gives you permission to see it if you're male, if you think you're going to see some nudity and sex.
Right.
That's all it promises to the average young man. Yeah,
and it kind of it's so deceptive in the marketing of that, and there's humor in it. There's some kind of dark humor throughout the movie, but it's a really gripping coming of age tale about this girl that is finding herself and finding just really kind of organic ways to deal with kind of some pretty dark shit. And it was such a great experience watching it, and being able to go into that ending with no real idea what was going to happen. And if you don't mind, I was going to see if you wanted to do like if you wanted to answer like a couple questions about the ending, and I can cut it and put it at the end of the episode for people that don't want to see it. But if you'd rather stay silent about it, then
I don't mind. I may not have any answers, but I'll try. So you're going to say like spoiler alert?
Okay, so that concludes the interview portion of the podcast, the non-spoiler interview portion, at least, of my interview with Allison Burnett. I just want to say once again, thank you to Allison for joining me on the podcast and talking to me about his career and about his feelings on independent filmmaking and about the experience of adapting Undiscovered Gyrl into Ask Me Anything and just everything. It was such a blast to get to talk to him, and I did talk to him briefly about the ending to Ask Me Anything, but as I've talked about it before on the podcast, it's something that you definitely need to see if you're going to see it. So I've cut that from this podcast episode, and I've put it after the pre-recorded outros that you'll hear with Mike here after the outro music in a bit. But just before we get to that, I just want to say, once again, thank you to Allison Burnett, and you can find him on Twitter at Allison_Burnett, and find his website at AllisonBurnett.com, and also email the main character from Undiscovered Gyrl and Ask Me Anything, Katie Campenfelt, at KatieCampenfelt.com. Of course, you can find all the links to everything on here, including the link to my review of Ask Me Anything on ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find all of that in the show notes of this episode. And so thank you for listening, and make sure that if you listen to the spoiler section, you do it after you watch Ask Me Anything, because it's definitely a movie that I'll be championing for a while, and definitely worth seeing and worth not being spoiled on. So once again, thank you, and we'll see you later this week with an episode with me and Tiny about Straight Outta Compton.
Join the Obsessive Viewer podcast on October 16th, 2015 at the Irving Theater in Indianapolis for The Obsessive Viewer Presents Shocktober in Irvington Part 2. It's a one-night event screening of short horror films from local artists J.P. Leck and Synapshot Productions. There will be giveaways, raffles, interviews with the filmmakers, and so much more. All proceeds will go directly to the Irvington Historical Society. Go to shocktoberinirvington.com for more details. And prepare to be shocked.
Thank you for listening to The Obsessive Viewer, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find more of our episodes at ovpodcast.com, and you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or your preferred podcast app. The Obsessive Viewer's theme song is An Eclipse of Events and is provided by Loudlike from their EP Mistakes We Must Make. You can find that and more great music from them on iTunes and like their Facebook page at facebook.com/loudlikemusic. Any and all feedback on the podcast is encouraged. You can email the hosts individually at Matt, Tiny, or Mike at ObsessiveViewer.com, or send an email to the podcast in general at podcast@ObsessiveViewer.com. Check out the Obsessive Viewer blog at ObsessiveViewer.com, where we post movie and TV reviews and the occasional editorial about the business of entertainment. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/TheObsessiveViewer and follow us on Twitter at ObsessiveViewer, at ObsessiveTiny, and at IamMikeWhite. If you want more obsessive content in your life, check out our sister site, ObsessiveBookNerd.com, for book reviews, author spotlights, and a general celebration of reading. Finally, if you're philosophically curious, check out Tiny's side project podcast, The Secular Perspective, which explores the concepts of faith, religion, and existence from the perspective of secular hosts. You can find that at thesecularperspective.com and subscribe to the podcast on the podcatcher of your choice. Again, thank you so much for listening. We love you. Be excellent to each other.
Okay, so if you have not seen Ask Me Anything yet, please go watch the movie and then come back and listen to this section of the podcast. You would be doing yourself a big favor by not listening to this portion of the podcast. So what I wanted to say, I don't really have questions for you because I'm a fan of ambiguity in endings. I like it when a filmmaker can create a story that is thought provoking, and I don't need it like wrapped up tidy. Like I don't need to know if she's alive or dead. I don't need to know who did it. But what I wanted to just kind of communicate to you really that that ending when it transitioned to the kind of documentary kind of style of filmmaking and the way that the reveal was handled with the mother's blog entries, and like I was just it just chilled me because it put me in a point where I could see like the hour and a half that I spent previous to that was like all leading up to this thing that you see all the time on the news, like young girls going missing, and you kind of I felt like it was a very private kind of viewpoint into this thing that the news has done so often lately in terms of creating this or telling the story of these missing girls, and it was just very sobering to see that, and being able to put it's sad to think that like when you hear about a missing girl, you're almost desensitized to it anymore because it happens so frequently, and it gets some of them get like big media attention, and it's really sad to see that be. What's
interesting is that there are people, I don't think it was you, but you tell me, who actually when they see the movie they think that at the end that those are real people.
I didn't mention this or anything, but I sat through and I watched until the end credits because I was wanting to see. I was like really, really hoping I would see the based on fictional, or it's fictional and all that, because I was so invested in this character and the story that
the easiest thing to do is to just look that there are names for all the actors who play those people at the end. I mean, they're extras. They're just extras. Yeah. And I purposely cast people that resembled the people in the story, but not quite. Mm-hmm. You know, they were like the poor man's version or something, or like they were. In fact, ironically, the beautiful girl that plays Mrs. Spooner at the end is a lovely actress who has been up against Kimberly Williams for parts that she has not received. And I just thought it was really kind of ironic.
Yeah.
But there are people, like I see on Twitter, a girl will say, "Oh my God, I just saw Ask Me Anything. I loved it, but I don't understand the ending at all." And a friend goes, "What don't you understand? It's all a true story. And those people at the end are the real people, and they're trying to help you, and maybe you can help find her." And I'm kind of stunned, and I don't even really know what to say. I never saw that coming. I never thought that would happen. I just thought of a movie's a movie.
Yeah.
And, if it were a true story, then it would say something like, if you know anything about Katie, something. But for me, the meaning of the movie has to do with not knowing. It has to do with the world of social media, the way we get lost in it, the world of illusion that surrounds it, the way young people hide the truth in the way that they self-promote and self-brand. And that mixed with the idea that this beautiful young girl, she doesn't stand a chance. I mean, she doesn't understand since she was a little girl and she got abused, she's never really stood much of a chance. And then she had that for a father and a mother who was so disengaged. And the only agency and power she feels in the world is through her sexuality. Mm-hmm. And she's drawing these men like moths to a flame. So it doesn't matter. When the mother says, I ask myself, who would want to hurt my daughter? And I hear the answer, everyone. It's because there's hatred for her from her blog viewers. Mm-hmm. There's hostility toward her. They hate her sexuality. They're constantly calling her a whore. They hate her because she's pregnant. You've got every which way, every way you look, this girl is under siege. I'm not saying she doesn't do things that make her partially responsible, but the context that she was born into and who she is and her rare kind of beauty just puts her in a really horrendous situation. And then you add that to the miasma of social media, and you have this creature that just appears and is gone.
Yeah,
in the book, you feel that she could have disappeared on her own. She could have run away because she couldn't handle all this. But in a way, the not knowing to me is what makes it a modern story. And if it had just ended when it could have ended on the Ferris wheel, in the roller coaster at the end, I think it would just be a movie about one girl. And I think now it's really a movie about a lot of girls and and our culture. Absolutely.
And I think that was really handled incredibly well. And I noticed that, and this can be the final thing, but the exclusion of the one night stand from the book. I don't know how to phrase it without kind of spoiling the book in any way. But was that just a time constraint measure? Okay.
So we actually shot it, and it was Jussie Smollett, and it just felt like one too many dudes she was sleeping with. It just kind of didn't work, and it felt depressing, and it was too long. And to put it bluntly, she just felt like too slutty. It was just too much.
Okay.
And once we took it out, everything came alive and felt freer and lighter. She was only sleeping with people that she really kind of believed that she loved in a way. And that just sort of made it easier.
Okay.
And time, too. This is a movie, you just didn't want to... You can't wear out your welcome in this day and age. You just can't have a movie that drags. And I don't think anybody could watch this movie and go, oh, I know where this is going. Oh, yeah, I know. I'm bored. I'm restless. Some people stop watching because they don't like Katie. I can't believe some of the prudery of the young people these days. I come from the 60s. I remember when young people, we were the coolest. We were the ones that were about free love, and the adults were square. Now the girls are like, oh my God, it's so sexual. This girl, she's such a slut. Or some guy will go, yeah, it's basically a movie about a hoe. It's like the judgmental nature. Yeah, it just cracks me up.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's an extension of the kind of self-branding and kind of the kind of way that everyone of this time period kind of puts themselves out there in social media, and maybe that's more a reaction to being exposed to just any kind of ridicule from anyone on the internet at any time. That's how I feel, at least. But
I can only imagine. I can't believe the horror it must be to be in high school and now sitting around wondering why hasn't she texted me in 12 minutes, and oh my God, we had one fight and now she changed her status on Facebook, and all that madness. Oh my God, all we had was the telephone,
Yeah.
You would dial 6 numbers and then you dial the 7th number and hold it and take a deep breath and get the courage to let go. And you let go and you would dial the 7th number and then you knew you were going to talk to her. That was our biggest thing. We didn't have any of this shit. I would go nuts.
Yeah, I got out of high school right before Facebook started, and I'm so happy every single day that Facebook was not a thing when I was in the most vulnerable state of my life, because that would have been just soul crushing.
Well, listen, I think technology is meeting us at the perfect time because you're sort of breaking up now.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Pixelating on my end.
Okay.
It was a great pleasure, Matt. And let's do it when the next movie comes out or the next book. And thank you for reading the books and reading Another Girl, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And, I'll
tell your listeners they can always tweet me or write or email me through my website.
Okay. I will definitely do that. Yeah.
And they can always write to Katie Campenfeld at katiecampenfeld.com.
Is that a real site?
Check it out, dude.
Oh, wow. That's going to be interesting. Yeah.
I know. It is. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you later. Thank you.